Hi there. My name is Jody Smith, and I am the Director of Career Development and Civic Engagement here at Central College. Today, I'm going to take a few minutes of your time to talk about an extremely important thing for you when you go to look to find employment after Central or even employment during your time at Central. And that is the topic of interviewing. Throughout the next few minutes, I hope to provide you some tips on the interviewing process so it'll help you land that next great job. So diving directly into things, always think that it's important to take a moment and kind of see where the interview process is in terms of the job application process. And just to remind you that our department here, the Career and Professional Development Department on campus, is here to help you get you through that process. So hopefully you've already kind of navigated through this process. So you started at point A where you came to Central, tried to figure out what you were wanting to do, what type of career you wanted to get, started researching employers in different positions. During that time, you've been engaging in some active networking with those employers and organizations outside of Central and within Central. You've developed that great resume and cover letter. You applied to the position with that resume and cover letter, and you are now here at the interview spot, hoping to land to that dream job, which is point B. So this slide is just a quick reminder that we are here to help you through that process, but let's get right into the interviews. So the purpose of an interview, right? First and foremost, congratulations, you've made it to this far. The employer or organization is very interested in you and they want to interview to see if you would be the great person or the best person for the position. So typically during the interview process, most students think, or people in general think, that the interview is solely just for the employer. I cannot emphasize enough that 100% is not the case. It's also your opportunity to research the employer. You need to really assess your fit within that company. First and foremost, do you think you can do the job? Will you enjoy that job? Will you fit in with the culture of that organization? Because reality is that you will spend most of your time at your job, and if you truly do not like that job, it's not going to be such a great experience for you. And so it's the interview process. It really is a dialogue that's aimed at getting for that employer to get to know that you, for example, but also for you to get to know that employer. You get to know them personally, technically, and it's their time to introduce you to the company and for you to decide whether or not that's going to be a good fit for you. In terms of prepping for the interview, first and foremost, before you set foot in the doors of that company, you really want to know what that company is and what they represent. You need to know what service or product that they provide. You should really familiarize yourself with the mission, vision, and values of that employer. Hop out on the website, check out the About Me section or About Us section of that company and read up on their mission, vision, and values. Is it something that is going to align with your own personal values? Find out whether or not if there's potential for advancement in a position. More often than not, as a recent grad, you're going to come into an entry-level position. You probably don't want to be in that entry-level position 4, 5, 6 years. After you took that first position, you want to know that there's growth within the company. And then taking a look at and seeing who is this organization, who works there, who are their administrators. Can you review their backgrounds, their achievements, see their growth within that company? How do you do that? Hop on LinkedIn and see if their administrators are on LinkedIn, so then you can check out the progression that they have led to get to themselves in those positions. Is it something that's happened internally? Did they hop around jobs? What does that look like for them? And then you need to know yourself, right? You need to be able to talk about yourself and be able to sell yourself. Oftentimes we talk about having an interview, or not an interview, having an elevator speech when you interview. And that really is true. You need to be able to sell yourself. You need to be able to talk through your short and long-term goals, know your strengths, your weaknesses. And you also need to be able to demonstrate those strengths and weaknesses. More often than not, we walk into an employer, into an interview, and you say, I have a strong work ethic. I am really great at time management skills. These are things that these recruiters hear every single day. What they're looking for is for you to actually show them how you have a strong work ethic. Give examples of your excellent time management skills. Being able to talk through and deal with the challenges and conflicts or failure. A lot of times they're going to ask you about your strengths, but they're going to want to know your weaknesses as well. They're going to want you to explain the weaknesses that you have and how you've been able to work through those. And then understand the type of work environment that you thrive in, right? You need to, are you a person that's a self-starter? Are you a person that needs a lot of oversight? Can you be handed a task and just dive right in and not have a whole lot of direction? You need to know that because the employer is going to be asking questions about that. And lastly, you need to be able to communicate effectively, right? So you should be able to anticipate the type of questions that are going to be asked. And then be able to discuss anything and everything that's on your resume and your experiences. The last thing you want to do is put something on your resume, be asked about it, and then not be able to explain it, right? So have specific examples of readily available so in case that employer does ask you. Schedule a mock interview with our department. We can schedule a mock interview with any employer that you would like to schedule an interview with. It gives you really great experience because it's a safe environment where that employer can provide you direct feedback on how well you did, and then you can make your changes as needed moving forward. One thing that I do want to just touch on here is dressing for success. First impressions really are everything. So before you even say a word to that interviewer or that recruiter, they are going to make an impression based off just solely the way you're dressed, the way that you present yourself, your handshake. And so you just need to be mindful of that. And then understand that every company does have a different dress code. So how you dress on the day-to-day may have very little to do with how you're supposed to dress during the interview. And if you're not sure how you should dress, it's perfectly okay to ask when they're calling to schedule that interview. Just ask them what the dress code is, what the expectation is, so there's no questions. And again, dressing for the job is a lot like dressing for success. There are several trends in fashion, smart casual, business casual, and you need to know what the difference is between business casual, for example, and business professional. So that way you're not struggling to figure out what to wear at the time of that interview. And to kind of give you an idea, we just put a quick graphic in here, just kind of describing what is the attire or level of attire for both men and women on the left side, men on the right, and then the professional dress is on the left for both women and men, and then the business casual is more so on the right. So you see the business professional, it's wearing a skirt for women and a blazer, or for men it's potentially doing a full suit, where business casual is more like a cardigan for women and a button-up shirt and khaki pants for a man, for example. This description is actually out on our My Central page, so I definitely, if you need reference on this when you're getting ready for an interview, definitely come check that out. But in terms of, you've already scheduled your interview, and so these are just the days leading up to the interview. What should you be doing during that? We kind of already briefly talked about that. But first and foremost, you need to know the modality of that interview. Is it an in-person interview? Is it a phone interview? Is it a Zoom interview? The last thing you want to have happen is to be sitting, waiting for a phone call when it should have been a Zoom interview, for example, or you're waiting for a phone call and it's an in-person interview. So just really knowing the type of interview is very important for you. If it is a Zoom interview, make sure where you're doing the interview, that you have good internet connection, and so you're not going to lose connection during the interview, and then make sure that the space behind you is a clean space. We do have interview rooms here in our department that you can easily utilize and just schedule to use one of those spaces. Why would you want to do that, right? Because it's a space that can be 100% controlled. There's not going to be anything that's going to be distracting in the background of that space. You won't have to worry about that. You're not going to have to worry about a roommate popping into your room when you told them that you were having an interview, but they forgot and so they popped in. You're not going to have to worry about loud noises or anything to that effect. It's completely controlled for you. So we highly recommend that you utilize our spaces to hold those Zoom interviews. If it's an in-person interview, you are going to want to arrive on time. What does it mean to arrive on time? I would say if your interview is at 11 o'clock, be there in that space by 10:45. So that way, that gives you plenty of time to arrive. Say arrive at 10:30, find where you're supposed to go, and then walk into that space at 10:45, 10:50. That lets them know that you're serious and that you're there. Dress appropriately again, and for that industry. So that's doing your research. And then researching the types of questions that may be asked of you from that employer for that typical position. How can you even do that, right? If you've never interviewed at that space before, you've never interviewed for that type of position before, how could you possibly know what kinds of questions are going to be asked? Great question. There are tools out there that can help you with that. One of them is Glassdoor.com, for example. Glassdoor.com is a website that you can go out for free, create an account for free, link it to your Gmail, for example, and that website actually has actual questions that employers have asked employees on certain positions. It also provides you information on their ratings of that employer. You know, what do their benefits look like? What does the culture within that company look like? What does the pay look like? Because there are pay information out there as well. So I highly recommend that you check out Glassdoor.com to get interview questions and then also to research that company. And then probably one of the more important things that students don't typically think about is having thoughtful questions available to ask the interviewer. And you want to make sure these questions are not things that could be easily found just searching on the website or doing a quick Google search, right? You need to have a couple of questions in your pocket so that way you have them available if the employer asks, because I guarantee you they are going to ask at the end of the interview, do you have any questions for us? The last thing you want to say is, no, I don't have any questions, because that's not going to give the good message to the employer. It's going to seem to the employer that you're not invested, that you truly don't care whether or not you get the position. If you have questions in your pocket, it's going to show them you're thoughtful, you've researched the company, and you're invested. The reason I say have questions prepared is because you can think, oh yeah, no, I'm sure I'll come up with a question during the time. It's a high stress situation typically during an interview, and more often than not, your mind may go blank just for a second. So you're always great to prepare and have those questions in mind, so that way you're not having to think on your toes for that. In terms of during the interview, I cannot emphasize enough, make sure your cell phone is on silent, or better yet, shut it off. So that way you're not tempted to look at your cell phone or they're not hearing it vibrate throughout the interview. If you wear a smartwatch, shut off your notifications or not even wear the watch into the interview, because out of habit, you just simply look down at your watch as soon as it vibrates or as soon as you see it light up. It's an instinctual habit and you just do it, but the employer is going to see it. First impressions are key. Make sure you smile, make good eye contact, and then offer a great firm handshake and greet the employer with his, her, or their name. Show them that you've taken the time to know who they are. Be a good listener. So that should go unsaid, right? Listen to what's being asked of you. Look at them directly when a question is being asked. Be positive, friendly, confident, enthusiastic, but that doesn't mean being over enthusiastic, right? So you just need to, there's a fine line there. And then answer questions with specific circumstances, explain the event, talk about the action, and then explain the results that you achieved based off of that action. If you're not sure what an employer is asking, definitely ask them for clarification and take the time to think before you answer. An employer is going to be impressed if you ask them, you know what, I'm not quite sure what you're asking. Can you give me an example? That's showing that you're not afraid to ask for clarification, which is a good trait to have in terms of an employer, to an employer. And it's okay for pause, right? Sometimes folks think that there should not be any pause during an interview. They feel like they need to fill every second of that interview with, with words, and that's simply not true. It is perfectly okay to think through the process of how you want to respond. I often tell students, okay, most of you have probably completed an essay exam at this point for a final. You don't immediately read the question and just start writing words on the page. You take time to think through your thoughts, and then you work through those thoughts. You have your introduction, your body, and your conclusion. I suggest that you approach interview questions the same way. Take a moment, think through your thoughts, think about what you want to say, how you want to say it, and then answer the question. In terms of questions that you may be asked, so there are very common interview questions. The first one, I guarantee you're going to be asked every single time. Tell me about yourself. That may be the most hardest question that you are going to have to answer during your interview. It seems pretty straightforward, but when you think about it, what does that actually mean? And so I will direct you, instead of spending the time here, I'm going to direct you to check out one of our other videos. I will link it in the information section of this video, or the resource section of this video. But it is from LinkedIn Learning. It's a short, like 3-minute video that's going to explain exactly how you should answer that question, because it is not as straightforward as you think. Why are you interested in this field? What motivates you? What challenges you? And another big one is, what are your career goals? Where do you see yourself in 5 years, 10 years? These are definitely questions that you most often will get asked at every single interview that you will have, regardless of the type of job, regardless of the industry that you're in. So be prepared to answer these questions. You're also going to be asked technical type questions. So think about, for example, in terms of your education, how did your education prepare you for this position, right? What type of certifications do you have that allow you to complete this position? Do you have any program knowledge? Really the purpose of these questions are to evaluate the skills and the level, and to get at an idea of how you process information and how you connect the dots. So how does your degree in communication studies, how is that going to help you, work work on your typical role as social media or design? How is that going to help you in that position, your communication skills? How are you going to utilize those to create a website for a company, for example, and do marketing and promotional stuff for a company? Will you use your communications degree? Probably. How are you going to use it, right? Those are the types of questions you'll be asked. And then 100%, you are definitely going to be asked behavioral-based questions. I would say every single interview that you'll ever have will have at least one, probably several behavior-based questions. These types of questions, for example, are: describe a time when you helped coworkers or classmates who dislike each other to work together. How did you accomplish this? What is the outcome? Okay, so that's just one example of a question. There's others. There's more on our My Central page for you to check out. But I guarantee you're going to be asked this type of question. And then we wholly recommend that students use what's called the STAR method. The STAR method actually works on both sides of things. It works for the person interviewing. It's a great way for you to organize your thoughts in your response. It's also the same way that the interviewer is going to score you on that type of question. So you just need to remember STAR, right? So S is for the situation. So explain the situation so that the interview can have an understanding of, or context of, your example, right? So it's something that's brief. You're going to spend about 20% of your response talking about the situation. You don't have to provide every single detail, just enough for the interviewer to understand the situation that you're talking about. Then you're going to want to talk about the task. So the task is the problem or the challenge that you took responsibility for. Responsible for. So briefly, just to talk about like what problem it was that you addressed. Majority of your response is going to be in the action section. So the A. This is where you explain the actions that you took to address the situation and the task that you were given. This is where you're going to highlight all your skills, your character traits, everything that you utilize to take action on the task. And then most importantly, you're going to talk about the result, right? You want to talk about what happened because of the actions you took on that task. This is where you want to highlight any important quantifiable results. So you could talk about how the company was faced with a situation where revenue was decreasing. You were given the task to increase revenue. These are the actions that you took, and in the results, you increased their revenue. Instead of being decreased by 10%, you actually increased it by 30, for example. And just kind of think through those types of things, okay? And I encourage you to practice these as well. That's where that Glassdoor comes in, glassdoor.com. You can look at the questions that are asked and kind of think through what types of questions you may be asked and type your behavioral type questions and work through the STAR method. So talk about the situation, the task that you were given, the action that you took, and what happened. What was the result? Case study type interviews or type interview questions. So you may be asked case study questions. These are, about real life scenarios. Usually there's not one correct answer to these. As long as you can make your case and provide an analysis, then you're usually good to go, right? So in terms of this, it's going to be based off probably something that's happened within that company. You need to listen to the interviewer and then ask the questions. And then you need to structure the problem and form a framework behind it. So ideally, what you're going to want to do to this is you're going to take in the information and quickly remember what you hear. You're going to identify the key issues and prioritize and logically solve those problems. Make quick yet accurate decisions. And then manage your time efficiently, right? So you don't want to be talking for 5 minutes. You want to, think through things and then get to it. And then you need to be able to perform, right? Under pressure, and then be aware of the resources constraints, identify customer needs, and then also be original and creative, right? So an example of this question might be, what would be your approach to introducing a product into a foreign market? What are the risks and benefits to consider? How would you answer that question, right? So this is where you need to kind of think through. Sometimes you're going to be asked questions. For example, I got asked a question that I'll never forget. Is how could you explain the color yellow to a blind person? I completely flumbered on that question because I was just like, what? How can I do that? And I didn't really think through the question, right? They were getting at how did I get, how quickly could I think on my toes? It was a new position that was going to have a lot of different things being thrown at it, and they wanted to see how I could handle that, and I failed to answer that question accurately. They didn't really care what my answer was. I just needed to be able to sell it to them, and so that's what I recommend to you is being able to sell things. And just think through it logically and be able to answer it, right? Okay. In terms of after the interview, so I cannot encourage you enough to follow up with that interviewer. Send them an email, send them, a quick note thanking them for their time. It will matter. So if you have two very good candidates and one of them sends a thank you note, one of them doesn't, I guarantee you the one that sends the thank you note is probably going to get hired for the position. We do have thank you cards up here in career development that I highly encourage you come to get. We also have, if you're not sure how to write a thank you note, like how to address it, we have a step-by-step guide on how to do that as well. But in terms of if you're going to send an email, you should really thank them, for their time, say, I'm really interested in the position, and then make reference to specific things you've discussed during the interview, things that you want to, bring back to their attention. That's how you can reinforce your certain skills, key points that will sell you and your interest in the position. You can also share something that maybe you forgot to mention during your interview. Be like, hey, I forgot to mention this, but I also want you to know X. And then request for a connection on LinkedIn. Search them out on LinkedIn. Are they out there? If so, Send a request to them. Show them that you are actually interested in the position. It will go a long ways for you. In terms of resources that we have here on campus for you, we do have our Backpack to Briefcase. It's our very large online document that you can get to through our career development page on MyCentral. Like I said, it's a very long document. It contains everything you need to know about getting a position after college. It helps you with your resume, interview skills, helps you with job searching information, reference information. It's a really great resource. It's an online resource again on our MyCentral page in career development. You can check out Handshake. We have a lot of resources out there on Handshake, and then again, our website is full of information as well. Like I said, go to MyCentral, hover over academics, click career development, and that is our page. And also, you're always welcome to come see us. We're on the second floor of Geisler. When you come up the stairs, instead of going to the left to go to the library, you actually turn right to come into our offices. We take walk-ins, appointments, anything that you may need. Highly encourage you to check us out, schedule a mock interview with us, and just come in with any questions you may have. And that's all I got for you today. Good luck on that interview. Thanks.